بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على النبي الأمي العربي القرشي الأمي المدني الهاشمي صاحب قاب قوسين محبوب رب المشرقين والمغربين جد الحسن والحسين النبي الحرمين والإمام القبلتين والرسول الثقلين الذين سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتخبين المنتجبين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين روحي وأرواح العالمين لتراب مقدمه الفداء واللعنة الدائمة الباقية على أعدائهم ومنكر فضائلهم وغاصب حقوقهم أجمعين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه تبارك وتعالى في محكم كتابه ومتقن خطابه: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم: ومن يبتغي غير الإسلام دينا فلن يقبل منه وهو في الآخرة من الخاسرين. بسائر صلوات على محمد وعلى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. To welcome this season of Hazara and mourning, reciting another salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And to hasten the reappearance of our holy Imam, reciting a third loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Over the next 10 or 11 evenings that we have the pleasure of each other's company, we're going to, inshallah, go on a journey. This journey is not a physical journey, because we'll be sitting in the same place for the whole time, but it's a journey of upliftment. It's a journey taking us to hopefully becoming better people. I was just recalling earlier on when I arrived here that the last couple of years, whenever I've gone abroad to address Majalis or Muharram, often at the airport when I arrive, wherever it happens to be, the immigration officer asks me, "What are you here to do?" So I tell them that I'm here to deliver lectures and speak about the message of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. So sometimes they ask, and the last couple of times they say, "What do you speak about? What do you tell people about?" I thought to myself, when I remember that first time when that officer asked me, I thought to myself that what do I speak about? Obviously I speak about lots of different things. The crowd that I'm speaking to is obviously familiar with lots of those things that maybe to the immigration officer I would have to take a long time to explain. But I thought that I need a sentence which could summarize everything that I talk about. So I thought to the wasiyah, the testament, the will that Imam Hussain alayhi salam writes to Muhammad Hanafiya when he's leaving Medina. And in that testament, Imam Hussain alayhi salam tells us about his message, tells us his purpose, his reasoning. Why does he leave Medina? And I summarized that into one sentence in English, and I said to the immigration officer, I tell people to be good people. Yeah. I try to get people to be good people. To be born as a person or a human being is not an achievement. But to be a good person definitely is an achievement. It is something to be proud of. To be born of a particular race or a particular country or a particular place, there's not anything to be proud of, even though people are. But to be a good person is an achievement. Here I'm reminded of a sher which is in Urdu. That Mirza Ghalib says, बस के दुश्वार है हर काम का आसान होना, बस के दुश्वार है हर काम का आसान होना, आदमी को भी मयस्सर नहीं इंसान होना. It's difficult for something to be achieved, and that difficulty is for a human being to be born, but to become a human being is very difficult, is what Mirza Ghalib is saying. So, to become a good person, you need somebody, or human beings need a person or people or group of people who they can look up to and say, these are the people that I'm striving to follow. So on this journey we're going to look at people, we're going to look at ideas, we're going to look at concepts and beliefs and practices to the ultimate goal to become good people. Recite salawat ala Muhammad wa This ayat of Holy Quran which I've recited today, of course every day we'll be discussing a different ayat. But today I thought as a way to introduce as a summary of what we will go into and to introduce out of. This is ayat number 85 of Surah Ali Imran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this ayat says something very, on the apparent surface of the meaning, which is something very severe and strong. وَمَنْ يَبْتَغِ غَيْرَ الْإِسْلَامِ الدِّينَ فَلَنْ يُقْبَلَ مِنْهُ وَهُوَ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ. Whoever takes away other than Islam, it would not be accepted from them. Whoever takes away, وَمَنْ يَبْتَغِ غَيْرَ الْإِسْلَامِ دِينَ, whoever takes a path other than Islam will not be accepted. وَهُوَ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ, and in the hereafter he would be a loser. Usually Muslims like to take this ayat and tell non-Muslims that because you are not a Muslim, it will not be accepted from you. But this ayat is not for non-Muslims. This ayat is for Muslims. This ayat is not for non-Muslims. This ayat is not, Muslims shouldn't recite this ayat to non-Muslims and say that because you didn't accept the religion of Islam, that's why you will not be successful in the hereafter. No, this ayat is for Muslims. Because it doesn't say whoever became a Muslim. It says, وَمَنْ يَبْتَغِ غَيْرَ الْإِسْلَامِ دِينًا, whoever took away a path and action other than that which Islam told him to do, would not be accepted from him. وَهُوَ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ, and in the hereafter he would be the one who would have loss, would be in loss. That means that in these 10 days, 11 days that we're together, we want to find out what is Islam and what is Ghair Islam. What we want to find out is how can we get out of this Ghair Islam from our lives and bring Islam into our life. Is it just restricted to acts of worship and acts of halal and haram and prohibition, and that I pray and I eat halal meat and that I do X, Y and Z and therefore that's it? Or it's something else other than that we want to achieve, and we find out the answer to that from the message of Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wassalam. The message of Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wassalam will tell us that if the objective was regarding prayer and fasting and so on and so forth, then we find that these things were not under threat. The people killing Imam Hussain alayhi salam were praying and they were fasting as well. Yeah. So these things are not under threat. People were praying and fasting, but they were killing the grandson of the Prophet as well. So prayer and fasting was not under threat. Now I don't want somebody to go away today and say that what Maulana said is that prayer and fasting are not important. The worry that is always there is that somebody will take something that they want to take and then say that what was said today, that prayer and fasting is not important. No, prayer and fasting is important, but it's not sufficient, and it's not what was under threat. People were praying and fasting. Whatever was under threat was something else that Imam Hussain ﷺ wanted to restore. And for that he took such a step that is so memorable. Now, one of the first questions that any person who hears and learns about the story of Imam Hussain asks is that this story, this episode, this battle, this massacre, it happened 1400 years ago. It happened so long ago. So why is it that you still remember this story? In these 14 centuries, lots of things have come and gone. And people have forgotten about them. But this is remembered, and you keep on reminding people every single year the same way. So this is one thing. Second thing, which will related to this first, is that some people, they come and they say, well, this was a political battle. This was a political problem between one person and the ruler. Alayhi billah, Imam Hussain was not happy with Yazid, so he rose against Yazid. So it's a political battle. This is what they say, it's not what I'm saying, this is what they say. This is a political thing. Now, this point is answered by this first one, that if it's a political thing, then political things come and go. Even before the politicians die, their politics is long before that forgotten. Even the ones who block the roads and say that change is coming, even they, after a few months, everyone forgets what their agenda for bringing change was, and that they had ever blocked the roads. 3 months down the line, 6 months later, a year later, 2 years later, 10 years later, you ask about this person and say, there's been hundreds of politicians and hundreds of people have come and they all said the same kind of things, and then none of them delivers whatever they want to deliver. And that's the one thing that's consistent about politicians. They always say the same thing and then they never deliver whatever they promise to deliver.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Recite another salawat ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
But the thing is, and politicians have their own importance, is not to say that that we are having a dig at politicians for no reason, but it is to mention the fact that if this is a political story, if it's a political battle, then there's been many political battles in the past and people have forgotten about them. No one remembers them for even a year or 2 years or 10 years, let alone for 14 centuries. So this answers this first thing, that it's in commemorating for 14 centuries, answers this point that it's not a political thing. If it was political, it wouldn't be remembered for this long, and that it has been remembered for this long means that there is something more than that. That means, and what is it that people remember about things, whether they are remembered as a religious significance or otherwise? Then the thing that people remember stands of principle, not of anything else. If somebody's principle is strong and that principle resonates with everybody in society, then people will remember that. That this person, he stood for his principle. Even the ones who disagree will say that this person stood for a principle and he made sure that this principle was enforced in society, at whatever cost it may have come. Imam Hussain alayhi salam, in this testament to Muhammad Hanafiya, he writes, he says that I am leaving Medina not for any desire to create war or bloodshed or fitna or anything else, but خرجت لطلب إصلاح أمة جدي. I have left, I am leaving, I'm going to do what? لطلب إصلاح جد أمتي. To bring reform in the nation of my grandfather. This is the reason for leaving. I'm leaving Medina to reform, to bring reform to the nation of my grandfather. An amara bil ma'roof wa anha anil munkar. How am I going to do that? I'm going to tell people to do the good and to stay away from that which is evil. This is the principle of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. This is Imam Hussain in his own words. Then there's no need to postulate why did he do this, why did he do that. He's telling us himself. He's saying, I am leaving in order to reform. In order to reform, and how am I going to reform? I'm going to tell people to be good people. The summary is this, that I'm going to tell people to be good people, to stay away from evil, and to tell them to act according to the teachings of my grandfather, the Holy Prophet, and my father, Amirul Mu'minin Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wasalam. So this is the summary of the mission. This is the summary of what he is about to do. So that means that any commemoration, any remembrance, any memory of Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wasalam has to be part and parcel of that, has to be a commandment to do good things, to be a good person, to try to reform society in whatever way, in whatever capacity that a person can do. That is the message from Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wasalam's commemoration. This is the first thing. The second thing is that this commemoration, in this way, is this the way? Is this the correct way? Is this a way that we have to keep consistent? Why is it that we do it in this particular way? So there's certain things that are consistent that you just heard from before me, that the Holy Prophet ﷺ initiates this thing. That Imam Hussain is born and he begins to remember this tragedy at the moment when he's born, which is of course a happy occasion. But the Holy Prophet ﷺ is saying that even this happy occasion, I'm remembering this aspect of Imam Hussein's life because it's so important. Because it's important to me. And anything that's important to the Prophet means that anybody who recites the kalim of the Holy Prophet is also important to them. Whatever is important to the Prophet, then whoever recites the kalim of the Prophet also, that thing is important for them. But there's one thing that I want to mention today in our introduction, which is that usually we have a monologue. The person from the top speaks and the people listen and then they go. And then afterwards they say, Maulana came and he said X, Y and Z, and usually the poor guy said something else, but people are representing him in some other way. Which of course happens because whatever a person says and whatever a person listens and a person understands can be different. It's natural. So I don't want this to be a monologue. I want this to be a dialogue. I want this to be where if there's something that I'm saying that you think needs some more clarity, something that needs more explanation, then I want you to let me know. I want you to tell me that this is what we want this to be explained further. We want to understand this more. We think that this should be understood differently, and then I want to hear as well, so that I know as well that whatever I'm saying is reaching in the way that I would like it to reach. Recite salawat ala Muhammad. So I'll leave the logistics to the organizers to decide when and where and how we'll do that session, but I want to make sure that that does take place. Now we come back that this way of commemorating, this way of remembering, this has a deep psychological reasoning behind it, and the reasoning of why it continues for so long, which is what? Which is that if a gathering is announced regarding an intellectual concept, an intellectual discussion, then only those who are interested in intellectual discussions would like to attend. And usually that's what happens. When there's an academic lecture going on a particular topic, only those people who are interested in that topic in the first place will come to attend that particular lecture. If there's a celebration going on, then unless I've been invited to that celebration, I'm not going to attend. If I attend, it's called gate crashing. If there's a wedding or a birthday or some other kind of celebration going on, it's expected that only those who are invited will attend. However, when it comes to matters of grief, in the worldly affairs, even for those people who are not religious, when it comes to matters of grief, nobody sends out cards saying that so-and-so has died, we want you to attend. No, you find out that this person has died, then the instinct within the human being, which is fitri, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created human being in this way. When you find out somebody has died, the instinct within me says, I should go to that person and offer condolences. I don't need to be invited. Why? Because that person is not in a state to invite people in the first place. If that person is going through grief, the last thing that he is going to do is going to send out invitation cards to say, come and see me. But if people find out, then he would be happy that at least people came to see me and they shared this grief with me. Therefore, grief is more powerful than celebration, and it's more powerful than intellectual exhortations. So, 14 centuries later, this grief still brings us together. This grief brings us together, and it brings together all kinds of people from all age groups and all intellectual levels and all educational levels. There's no discrimination within that. Why? Because this is the nature of grief. The nature of grief is to bring people together. Therefore, we made this the focal point of bringing these two things together. That the grief will bring people together, and the grief has a purpose and a principle, and that principle will be exalted in amongst the discussions that will take place to make it worthwhile for people to come and join in these discussions. Recite salawat ala Muhammad. So now this commemoration, this thing about commemoration, is remembering things from the past something that Islam is consistent with, religion consists of this thing or not? Remember what did we say? We said this ayat says, وَمَنْ يَبْتَغِ غَيْرَ الْإِسْلَامِ دِينِ. Whoever took a way other than Islam will not be accepted from that. And they would be, in Akhirat, in the next life, they will be from the losers. What does Islam think about remembering things and remembering things from the past, in particular things regarding grief? Well, we read in the Quran many stories which give us some indication about what the religion of Islam thinks about the past, and particularly about remembering things from the past, which in itself is very fascinating area. Maybe in the coming nights we'll look at some of those things in a bit more detail. But just as an indication, as a way into our discussion. The first thing is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created a ritual that is a total memory of the past. That ritual is an obligation upon all Muslims once in their lifetime at Makkah. That whole ritual, every single act in that ritual is a memory of something that's already been done. Every single act, those of you who've been for Hajj know that every single ritual in that act is a memory of something that's already happened in the past. Particularly of that, of course I don't want to make this whole thing about Hajj, but particularly from that is that fast jogging from Safa to Marwa, which is a remembrance of Hajra looking for water for Ismail. Now until the day of judgment, every single man and woman will be obligated to follow the act of a woman in order to complete an obligation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As a remembrance, she went running for water. What are all these millions of Hujjaj every single year? What are they doing? They're just remembering that act that she did. We aren't going there looking for water. They have water everywhere. But remembering that, remembering that act that she did, every single person, and the Hajj is incomplete if you don't fulfill this memory. And that is the case with every single act of the Hajj. Is a remembrance and a memory of that of the past. Similarly, the Quran tells us about a prophet of Allah called Yaqub. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took his son Yusuf away from him. And then the angel came and told him that your son is alive. He started to weep over the fact that his son was separated from him. The angel came and assured him that your son is alive. Yet he cried so much that the whiteness of his eyes disappeared. Yaqub alayhi salam cried so much that the whiteness of his eyes disappeared over the fact that Yusuf was separated from him and he was alive and well, and not only that, he became the Aziz of Misr. He became the king of Egypt. Not only did he came from this humble background and this humble beginning, and he became the king of Egypt, but Yaqub cried over him until he returned back to, and they were reunited again. So, and not only that, why did I mention this story? Not only that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the crying of Yaqub was not against patience. It was not contrary to patience, but rather it was his patience that he cried for so long. That crying is not going against patience, that if somebody says that if somebody is crying, that means that they're going against the act of patience, they should be patient. No, the action of Yaqub crying, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, is the ayn sabr. That is patience that he exhibited, that he cried over Yusuf and the separation of Yusuf for so long. And then what happened? Then when they reunited, they said, put the shirt of Yusuf on his eyes, and his eyes came back. This is mentioned in the Holy Quran, so Yusuf, the whole story. Put the shirt of Yusuf. Why did they put the shirt of Yusuf? Why didn't he pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring the eyes back? Why did he put the shirt of Yusuf? He said, no, because the shirt is associated with Yusuf. And it was over Yusuf that he was crying. Put the shirt of Yusuf, and his eyesight was regained as a result of putting the shirt of Yusuf on his eyes. So, this is the second thing. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us a story about a prophet in the past saying that, look, he cried over his son who was alive. After that, after the tragedy and the killing at Karbala, Imam Sajjad used to cry. He cried so much, he went to Sajda, he cried so much that he looked like he would become unconscious. A servant came to him and he said, Ya Ibn Rasulullah, so many years have passed after Karbala, and you're still crying? And he said to him, you didn't do justice with me. You didn't do justice with me. He said, why? He said, Yaqub had 12 sons, and one of them disappeared. He didn't die. He just was separated from him. And he cried so much that the whiteness of his eyes left him. He became blind. He said, but I saw 17 of my family members killed in front of me. I saw 17 of my family members killed in front of me. How can I not weep over them? In those circumstances, in that way they were killed. So this is the second thing about our commemoration. The first thing is that grief brings us together. The second thing is the message that he portrays from Imam Hussain, and the way that we express this grief. The way that we recall this story and express it. And this is the third thing, which is a trade secret, but I'm letting you onto that trade secret. Which is what? Which is that when you cry, when you feel grief, when you feel aggrieved, then the heart becomes soft. And then if I say something that ordinarily you wouldn't listen to, you'll be more accustomed to listen to that as well. Recite salawat ala Muhammad. Because the heart becomes soft. The person comes here willing to listen and change and reform their life. This is the summary of what obviously every single night we'll have different topics, inshallah ta'ala, to enhance our understanding of a particular area, whether it's to do with our beliefs, or it's to do with our practices, or to do with our spiritual upliftment, which is what ultimately we want to do. Those of you with very good memories, who might recall what I mentioned here 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created human beings with certain capabilities, and those capabilities, when they go towards perfection, they make the human being that which is a good person. The first capability is that of intellect, of aql. That capability has to be taken to hikmah, to wisdom. If that is taken to wisdom, then human being will go to full potential. The second capability is of shahwat, of desire. If that capability is taken to iffat, which is to protect those desires and only fulfill them in the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants me to do so, that will be the perfection of that capability. And the third one is ghadab or anger. And if that goes towards shuja'at, towards chivalry and bravery, then that will also reach its stage of perfection. And all three of these capabilities, to see the exemplar of that perfection of them, we can see all of them in Karbala. Whether we want to find aql taken towards hikmah, or we want to see shahwa taken towards iffat, or we want to see ghadab taken towards shuja'at. All of them, we see them in this story of Karbala.
Babazi Buland Salawat.
And the beginning of the story of Karbala is way before the month of Muharram. This month, beginning of Muharram, that is starting tomorrow. Traditionally, we lay down this, you see the black being laid down, we wear the black, and then we show through this that we are in grief. That we have started and initiated grief. But the story of this grief begins much earlier than that. The story of this grief begins in the month of Rajab, prior to the Muharram, that of Imam Hussain. In that Rajab, in 60th year after Hijrah, sometime after the second half of this month of Rajab, the Amir of Sham, who's the Khalifa, who's the ruler of the Muslim world, he dies. Shortly before he dies, contrary to the advice that's given to him by certain people from his own advisors, he appoints Yazid as his successor. So this news reaches Medina. It takes time, of course. There's no instant messaging of WhatsApp in those days for news to reach immediately. It takes some time for people to find out that he's died and Yazid has become the Khalifa. When he died, or as he's dying, he leaves a message to Yazid. In that message, he says that I want you to make sure that you leave these three people alone, because they are the elder statesmen of the Ummah now, and they are the memories of past people gone in the past. He says, leave Abdul Rahman ibn Abu Bakr because he's the son of the first Khalifa, and leave Abdullah ibn Umar because he's the son of the second Khalifa, and leave Hussain ibn Ali because he's the grandson of the Holy Prophet. And then from everybody else, make sure you take the allegiance and leave them be. So Yazid, what does he do as soon as he becomes the Khalifa? He writes letters to these three people. As soon as he becomes Khalifa, he writes letters to Abdul Rahman ibn Abu Bakr and Abdullah ibn Umar and Hussain ibn Ali. And he writes to, because all of them live in Medina, he writes to the governor of Medina. And he says that I want the allegiance from these three people, especially from Hussain alayhi salatu. So governor of Medina, Walid ibn Uqba, calls Imam Hussain alayhi salatu late at night. It's mentioned that Imam Hussain alayhi salam is sitting in the Masjid of the Holy Prophet with Abdullah ibn Zubair, also son of the companion and cousin of the Holy Prophet. So they're discussing something, and the messenger comes to Imam Hussain alayhi salam and says that the governor of Medina wants to see you. So as he's getting up, Abdullah ibn Zubair asks Imam Hussain alayhi salam, he says, do you know why the governor of Medina has called you to his palace? Imam Hussain alayhi salam says that, I know. He says, what is it that you've been called for? He says that the Khalifa has died and Yazid has become the Khalifa in his place, and the question of pledging allegiance has come. So Abdullah ibn Zubair says, so what are you going to do? So Imam Hussain said, you'll find out tomorrow. So he goes to the palace and he starts reading out the letter. As he's reading the letter, he becomes embarrassed and he gives the letter to Imam Hussain. And Imam Hussain reads the letter himself and then he hands it back and he says to him, don't you think that it would be better if this matter was discussed in the daytime in front of everybody rather than doing it late at night? And the governor says, okay. There Marwan is sitting there and he says to Walid, he says, if you let Hussain go, you won't get him again. Hussain says that. So Marwan says, either you kill him or you take allegiance. Hussain says, are you threatening me with death? Are you threatening me that either you give allegiance or you die? And Imam Hussain left. The next day, the masjid, the letter was read out. Imam Hussain had made his decision and he announced his decision that I'm leaving. I'm not responding to this thing. But what did he say? In that response to that, what did he say? He says, Mithli la yuba'u mithli. Someone like me can't pledge allegiance to someone like Yazid. So he's saying that later on, if anybody says it's a political battle, he never mentioned himself and Yazid. He just said someone like me cannot pledge allegiance to someone like Yazid. I always ask a question here, I stop here whenever I'm reflecting on this story. I ask a question and I stop and I pause and I reflect over this question. And that is, that if everybody in the Muslim world has pledged allegiance to you, what is it about Hussain that you want allegiance from him? Everybody has pledged allegiance to you. All the Muslims are saying, yes, you are the Khalifa. But Hussain is not accepting you. So, why are you so insistent on getting allegiance from Hussain? So whatever reply will come from there, that reply will tell us why this commemoration is so important. Because the reply will come, all of the ummah is on one side and Hussain is on one side. Reply will come that yes, everybody has pledged allegiance, but all those allegiances are not altogether, are not worth the allegiance of Hussain alayhi salam. Therefore, Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti had said, Shah ast Hussain, Badshah ast Hussain, Deen ast Hussain, Deen Panah ast Hussain, Haqqa ke binai la ilaha ast Hussain, Sardad Nada dast sar daste Yazid, Haqqa ke binai la ilaha ast Hussain. Salawat ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti did not, I don't want to give him any labels, but he did not belong to the school of thought that I belong to. He says, Deen ast Hussain. Hussain is religion. Hussain is deen. وَمَنْ يَبْتَغِ غَيْرَ الْإِسْلَامِ دِينًا فَلَنْ يُقْبَلَ مِنْهُ وَهُوَ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ. Whoever takes away other than Islam will not be accepted from him, even if he calls himself the Khalifa of Muslims. Deen ast Hussain, Deen Panah ast, and Deen has got protection, religion has got Panah and safety also from Hussain alayhi salatu wasalam, and that La ilaha is safe because of Hussain alayhi salatu wasalam. Recite salawat ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajah.
La ilaha is also because of Hussain alayhi salatu wasalam. So what this journey that we're going to go on from tomorrow inshallah ta'ala will be to find out that I made this grand claim that Deen is Hussain and Deen is protected by Hussain and La ilaha is because of Hussain. Then you want to say to me, we want to know What is the dalil and proof that this you have made this claim? What is the proof? So this is inshallah ta'ala. We're going to look at each day by day. About what is it about this commemoration and what is it about Hussain alayhi salatu wasalam that led somebody like Muinuddin Chishti to say Deen is Hussain. That Deen, religion is Hussain, and whatever is other than Islam will not be accepted from you and you will be from the So Imam Hussain alayhi salam, he said what? He said someone like me will not pledge allegiance to someone like Yazid. So that means that since that day, since Imam Hussain alayhi salam making this statement, there's only two options. Either you are with Hussain or you are with Yazid. So if somebody comes out and they say we want to be with Yazid, okay, be with Yazid. So it's your choice to be with Yazid. But if somebody wants to be with Hussain and somebody wants to ask this question, that what happened within 50 years of the Prophet dying, that the grandson of the Prophet is killed by people who profess to be Muslims, then this question will certainly remain, and people will be free to ask this question and find out why and what happened that led this kind of thing to happen. And if we understand that, then yes, we will also understand why people today who profess to be Muslims are killing people who profess to be Muslims. Because we don't want to make these discussions a story from the past. No, we want to make them a story from the past that is lesson and relevant for our current and for our future as well. So if we find out the answer of why did people who profess to be Muslims kill the grandson of the Prophet, then we will find out today why people who profess to be Muslims are killing people who also profess to be Muslims. And that the biggest victims of those people killing are Muslims and not non-Muslims. So we'll find out that the story and the history of this is very old and existent from a very long time. In any case, so Imam Hussain alayhi salam, he makes the preparations to leave Medina. And at this point, sometimes I engage in these kind of questions as well, just to make sure that we are on the same track. Imam Hussain alayhi salam, he left Medina. But sometimes we like to ask what if questions. What if he didn't? What would happen? What if he didn't leave Medina? So maybe, obviously the what if questions we'll never know for sure what would happen. But we can postulate based on what did happen. And we would say that maybe battle would have taken place in Medina. So Imam Hussain alayhi salam is saying that yes, I know that I'm going to be killed and I'm going to die, but I want to protect the sanctity of this city. I don't want it to happen in Medina. I don't want it to happen in the city of my grandfather. I want this city to be the city of peace. I want this city to be the city. In the ziyarat of the Holy Prophet of Islam is mentioned, Ya sahib al-waqar wa sakina. You are the possessor of honor and of sakina, of peace, of tranquility. That the city of Medina is peaceful because of the fact that the Holy Prophet of Islam is buried there. So, the Imam Hussain says, I want this to be the city of peace. I want that peace to be. I don't want them to be fighting because of me. Yes, later on people will be killed and die and there will be battles, but it won't be because of me, Hussain alayhi salam. So I'm leaving. And this decision is not easy. Anybody who has left their hometown or their home city knows how difficult it is to get up and leave. And not only by yourself, but with your whole family and every single member of your family. And most particularly it is difficult for the people whom you leave behind. Most difficult is for those are the people whom you leave behind. Whether they're old, but particularly when they're young. Particularly when they're young. Imam Hussain alayhi salam, he says to all the women that are preparing to leave, he says, go into that room and bid farewell to Fatima Sughra, but don't spend any longer than you need to spend in that room. Go in the room and bid farewell and come out. Every Bibi goes in, she bids farewell, and then she comes out. Finally, Bibi Zainab Salamullah alayha goes into that room. When she goes into that room, Fatima Sughra chances her moment. And she holds on to the Aba of Bibi Zainab Salamullah alayha. And she says, oh my Aunt Zainab, I want you to intercede to my father to not leave me behind. Ajrukum Allah. I want you to intercede to my father to not leave me behind. Ajal Muhtaram, bas maine chand jumle tumhe bayan karne ho, aapki zahmat tamam karne, waqt pura ho gaya. 1437 हिजरी का आखिरी चांद गुरूब हो गया और 1448 हिजरी का पहला चांद नमूना। 1437 का आखिरी सूरज गुरूब हो गया, 1438 हिजरी का पहला चांद नमूना और फर्शा को बिछा दिया, काले लिबास को तन कर लिए। अब 2 महीने के लिए हुसैन अलैहिस्सलाम को घर में मेहमान बनाए। 2 महीने के लिए इस फर्श अज़ा को बिछा करके हुसैन को घर मेहमान बनाए। मैंने जुमला जहाँ से रोका था वहीं से मुकम्मल करता हूँ और बात तमाम कर देता हूँ। फातिमा सुगरा ने ज़ैनब कुबरा का दामन पकड़ लिया और कहा, फूफी अम्मा, बाबा से मेरी सिफारिश कीजिए कि मुझे छोड़ कर ना जाए। ज़ैनब कुबरा हुजरे से बाहर निकली, मौला हुसैन की खिदमत में आई। कहा, फातिमा सुगरा कह रही हैं कि मुझे छोड़ के मत जाइए। हुसैन अलैहिस्सलाम फातिमा सुगरा के हुजरे में आए और कहने लगे, फातिमा, तुमको ये मालूम है कि मैं बहुत तूलानी सफ़र पे जा रहा हूँ, तुम अलील हो, तबीयत ठीक नहीं है। फातिमा सुगरा कहने लगी, बाबा, लेकिन आप तो अली असगर को भी लेके जा रहे हैं, आप तो शशमाहे को भी लेके जा रहे हैं और मुझे क्यों छोड़ के जा रहे हैं? अब हुसैन अलैहिस्सलाम बहाने से बात को ख़त्म करना चाहते हैं। फातिमा सुगरा इसरार किए जाती हैं। एकदम हुसैन अलैहिस्सलाम के आंसू गिरिया करना शुरू किया। कहा, फातिमा, तुम्हें ये भी मालूम है कि तुम मेरी बेटियों में मेरी माँ फातिमा ज़हरा से सबसे ज़्यादा मुशाबिह हो। अजरुकुम अल्लाह। अल्लाह आपको किसी गम में न रुलाए सिवाय गम हुसैन के। हुसैन कहने लगे, फातिमा, तुम्हें ये मालूम है कि मेरी बेटियों में तुम मेरी माँ फातिमा ज़हरा से सबसे ज़्यादा मुशाबे हो और तुम्हें ये भी मालूम है कि मैं बचपन में अपने नाना से ये वादा कर चुका हूँ कि मेरे कत्ल के बाद बीवियों को असीर भी किया जाएगा, चादरें भी छीनी जाएंगी। मुझसे ये गवारा न होगा कि वो बेटी के जो मेरी माँ के मुशाबे है उसे असीर बना करके बाजारों में फिराया जाए। ये गवारा नहीं है कि जो मेरी माँ से मुशाबे है उसकी चादर छीनी जाए। अजरुकुम अल्लाह। हुसैन अलैहिस्सलाम हुजरे से बाहर निकले, फिर रुखसत आखिर के लिए चले। नाना रसूल खुदा की कब्र पर आए, अपनी सारी दिल की बातें बयान की। कहा कि नाना, अब ये वक्त भी आ गया कि आपके शहर में आपके नवासे को चैन नहीं है और यहाँ से चले, रोज़ा रसूल से चले, उसके बाद माँ के कब्र की तरफ आए। लेकिन रवायत कहती है कि معمولی انداز میں نہیں آئے بلکہ گھٹنیوں ٹیکتے ہوئے جیسے چھوٹا بچہ ماں کے پاس آتا ہے اس انداز میں حسین ماں کی قبر پر آئے اور وہاں سے بھی رخصت ہوئے. رخصت ہو کر کے سب بیویوں کو حکم دے دیا. اب جب سب بیویاں نکلنے لگیں ہر بیوی آتی تھی اس کا والی و وارث اسے محمل میں بڑی شان سے سوار کراتا تھا. سب بیویاں سوار ہو چکی تو آخر میں زینب کبریٰ کے سوار ہونے کا وقت آیا. کس شان سے سوار ہونے کے لیے آئیں؟ ایک طرف سے عباس آئے ایک طرف سے علی اکبر آئے. محمل کو پکڑے ہوئے امام حسین کھڑے ہیں. زینب کبریٰ سوار ہونے لگیں تو جھک کے عباس سے بڑا عجیب و غریب جملہ کا. عباس وعدہ کرو کہ ہمیشہ اسی شان سے محمل میں سوار کراؤ گے. اجرکم اللہ. بس میں نے مجلس تمام کر دیا. آخری جملہ کا عباس وعدہ کرو ہمیشہ اسی شان سے محمل میں سوار کراؤ گے. عباس نے سر جھکا دیا. کہا بی بی جب تک کہ غلام زندہ ہے وعدہ رہا. دل کہتا ہے 11 محرم کی صبح کو زینب نے فرات کا رخ کر کے کہا ہوگا عباس کیا وہ وعدہ بھول گئے؟ تو پیچھے سے سید سجاد نے گھٹنا ٹیک کر کے کہا کہ ابو پی اماں اگر چچا عباس نہیں تو میں تو ہوں. آئیے بھتیجا پھوپھی کو سوار کرائے گا. الا ولعنۃ اللہ علی القوم الظالمین وسيعلم الذین ظلموا ای منقلب ینقلبون. پروردگار سے دعا ہے کہ ہماری قلیل عبادت کو اپنے بارگاہ میں طرف قبولیت عطا فرمائے. عزائے امام حسین علیہ السلام میں جتنے بھی آنسو بہائے گئے ہیں انہیں رومال زہرا میں جگہ عطا فرمائے. ہمیں اہل بیت عصمت و طہارت کی سیرت طیبہ پر عمل پیرا ہونے کی توفیق عنایت فرمائے. دنیا میں ان کی زیارت اور آخرت میں شفاعت نصیب فرمائے. جو بھی پریشان حال ہیں ان کی پریشانیوں کو دور فرمائے. جو بیمار ہیں انہیں بیمار کربلا کے صدقے میں شفا عطا فرمائے. مومنین و مؤمنات مسلمین و مسلمات دنیا میں جہاں کہیں بھی ہیں بالخصوص جہاں ظلم اور ظالمین کا شکار ہے ان کی عزت آبرو جان اور مال کی حفاظت فرمائے. ہمارے آقا اور مولا کے ظہور میں تاجیل فرمائے. ہمیں قابل بنائے کہ ہم ان کے اعوان و انصار میں سے شمار کیے جائیں. ربنا تقبل منا انک انت السمیع العلیم بحق محمد و آلہ الطاہرین. ماتم حسین.
مائک نہیں چاہیے ایسے ہی لیڈیز اپنا کریں. اس کو سوئچ آف کریں.